team in the domain of cyber information security. So welcome to this one-on-one session on security awareness for not-for-profit staff, and do you know how to keep your organization secure? So without further ado, I'll get started. We've got about 20 minutes of content and then 10 minutes for questions and answers at the end. You may see in the chat that there's a couple of polls there. We'll have polls as we go through. I'll let you know when you can submit your responses to those as we go through. So for now, if we can just leave them be, that'll be great. Thank you. All right.
Thanks, Maurice. Just a couple of housekeeping things. Currently, all lines are muted. If you've got any technical issues or questions, please enter them in the chat and we'll get to them as quickly as possible. We will answer all questions in the Q&A session during our session wrap-up. We do encourage you to ask as many questions as you would like through the session and that you can think of, as this will make it a dynamic and interactive session as possible. No questions too silly. We're all here to learn about cybersecurity. Okay, just a note that this webinar is being recorded. That should have popped up on your screen before, and I'll hand back to Maurice.
Thank you, Michelle. So I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land that I'm on today, the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, and I'd also like to pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging. So today's webinar will cover a top view of cybersecurity threats facing organizations, the top 5 things that not-for-profit staff must know to keep their organization's data safe, a high-level overview of some imperative measures every organization needs to have in place, some resources and references from the Digital Transformation Hub, as well as other online resource, and some questions and answers for your environment. Information security practices are no longer nice to have. Given the increasing nature of our digital footprint and increasing threats, we must build security resilience into our organizations. Security has been in the headlines every month, with a number of organizations across all sectors of the economy being affected. A view of some of the headlines within the community services sector, as well as from government over the last 18 months, are on these slides. On the top left, Oxfam had a donor information breach of over 1 million Australians when they had a database that was accessed in a security incident. On the top right, the incident in March involved a caseworker who worked at a community services organization, had access to an IT system provided by the Department of Health and Human Services. After leaving the position, their access to the system was not revoked, and then thereafter they accessed confidential information related to children and committed sex offences. On the bottom left, Uniting Care Queensland had an attack on some of its IT systems and had to resort to using manual workarounds because IT systems were not available. On the bottom right, an incident experienced by Uniting Communities in South Australia, where staff were unable to access certain systems due to a cyber incident. Again, this would have required manual workarounds and change in business process. On the top there, linked to My SA Government, there's an IT system where individuals' accounts were accessed via stolen password credentials. Now, this was possible because people had used the same passwords across online systems, and when one system is compromised and passwords obtained, the same passwords gave access to My SA Gov accounts and information such as driver's license numbers, which are a key piece of identity information. On the bottom left, the Australian Red Cross indicated clients were caught up in a cyber attack where a database of the parent organisation, the ICRC, was compromised with personal information of people who had sought services for loved ones being accessed in an unauthorized manner. And from earlier this year, on the top right, with the Russia-Ukraine tensions, there have been warnings from the Australian government for organisations to adopt an enhanced cybersecurity posture. While some organisations may not be targeted directly, in this instance, they could be caught up in attempts to compromise other Australian organisations. And the last one there on the bottom right is from an NDIS case management system provider who was caught up in a data breach in May, where personal information relating to customers who used their systems and the customer's clients and carers was compromised. This had included the likes of Medicare details and tax file numbers. So as you can see, the impacts of incidents from cyber attacks vary. In some cases, data is inaccessible due to being locked up by what is known as ransomware, and in other cases, personal information is disclosed via a data breach and could then have potential implications for individuals. Here's some fairly recent statistics on scams and cybercrime in Australia. The data points are important to review because they highlight what's going on in the landscape. The Australian Competition and Consumer Commission, the ACCC, Targeting Scams report indicates that in 2021, Australians reported over 566,000 scams and losses of over $1.8 billion. And the top 3 scams reported were investment, business email compromise, and romance scams. In the middle there, a statistic from the Australian Cybersecurity Centre from the recent cyber threat report notes that over the 2020 and 2021 financial year, there have been over 67,500 cybercrime reports, and this equates to 1 every 8 minutes. On the top right, the Office of the Australian Information Commissioner received about 460 data breach notifications under the notifiable data breach scheme in the reporting period July to December 2021. These are data breaches where personal information was compromised and could result in serious harm to individuals, and malicious or criminal acts are the leading source of these data breaches. So these increasing events in our headlines and statistics on cybercrime are indeed a call to action for organizations to review their cybersecurity practices. A key message is that the human element contributes to drive data breaches. Based on a recent global data breach investigation report released in May, 82% of breaches involved the human element. The human element is that people component. For example, for staff to be aware of certain processes and how to securely share information, or how to use technology securely by creating a strong password. Security behaviors and the culture and sentiment and security within an organization is greatly influenced by you, your staff, and perceptions of risk. And most importantly, these perceptions can be changed. Security is really everyone's responsibility. Let's get into the top 5 things that you must know to keep your organization's data safe. The first is know how to spot a phishing email. Phishing emails are sent with the aim of tricking the recipient into clicking on a link, opening an attachment in the email, or giving up their personal information. This is an example of one that was received at Info Exchange. So as you can see, the timestamp on the email, it's 6:20 in the morning. It might have been one of the first emails the staff member saw as they opened their mailbox. And it says, oh, you've got messages waiting in your Office 365 mailbox. They can't be delivered. So the staff member clicked on the review button, and what was presented with what looked like a standard SharePoint login page with the username already filled in. They entered their password and clicked login. Now, at that point, they've given up their password. Fortunately, in this case, we have multi-factor authentication, which is that additional code that you need in addition to your password to get into a system. So the account access was blocked. We still ask the staff member to change their password. Now, if you look at the telltale signs in this email, the from address is a .de extension. That's got nothing to do with Microsoft 365. The link that is displayed there next to the review button has got a strange number of strange characters in there. Doesn't quite look right. So important to pay attention to these telltale signs. The next one here is an example of what is called business email compromise, and this is on the increase. As we saw when we reviewed some of the statistics earlier. In this case, there was an email received by our payroll department, and it appeared to come from a staff member requesting a change of their bank details. It said, I've changed my bank. Can you please effect this change because I'd like my pay to go into a different account. So initially, the payroll department responded requesting the new bank details and not noticing the from email address. The second email was then sent through, and at that point, payroll realized that due to the grammar in the email, it was not legitimate. So again, as you can see, the from address, if it would have been from a staff member, would have been from an email address that you would expect, and that's not the case here. The third example is with an attachment that's looking like it's an invoice that's come through for an amount of US dollars 107,000. It would be tempting to click on that attachment and see what it's about. But again, this could result in malware being installed on your machine. Again, the telltale sign here is look at the from address. It's a .de extension. We don't do business with organizations that have email addresses like that. So another one to take note of. This is a useful poster which highlights the general attributes of a phishing email. Note that not all of these may apply because phishing emails can have different intents, as we just saw. With phishing, the attacker uses social engineering principles to trick the person into performing an action. And these principles may be a sense of urgency or scarcity. So if you look at the example here, the message is that you're eligible for a tax refund. I mean, that would be great. Who wouldn't like that? So it would be really enticing to click on the link there. But it's also important to take note of the other things within the email. There's an attachment, which is an executable file. The from address is atogov.com. Australian government addresses end in a .gov suffix. And also looking at the link again, when you hover over the submit your tax refund here, that looks odd. So these are some of the example, the telltale signs in an email. And while this poster references what to watch out for in emails received, the same technique is also used to get people to clicking on links via text messages, messaging apps, and also via phone calls, what's known as phishing. So these other means are also prevalent, not just phishing emails. Okay, now we have that poll with the two questions that I mentioned earlier along the topic of can you spot a phish? So these are taken from the Australian Cybersecurity Centre quiz. And this is the first question. You are a donor with an organization called Good to Give, and you receive this email indicating your request to reset your password. So have a look at this email, including the link that's displayed there next to the blue reset password button, and select one of the options that you think is best. Is this email real, or should you delete the email? We'll give everybody a few minutes to do that. I believe you can see the poll in the chat and you can submit your vote there. You can't? Okay, my apologies. So I think if you could just pop into the chat, this email is real, or delete the email, that would be great. And we'll just take an average of the responses. Okay, I can see some responses coming through. Okay, great. Couple more seconds. Okay, thank you. I've seen some good comments in there. Yeah, the answer is the email is real. So if you look at the from address, the organization is Good to Give.